readings available while she's in town are all filled, I'm sorry to say, or pleased to say, either one. But she does do phone readings from New York, and those are very effective and always fun. I met Louise a little over 6 years ago, and it was like discovering a sister that I just hadn't happened to meet yet this life. This seems to be, yeah. And since I was about 10 years old, I've always known that we really don't die. I had this very deep belief that we're not, that our bodies, yes, do die, but that who we essentially are does not die. And yet 5 years ago when my husband died, it was very real. And while I knew that, this essential part of him was still living, it was very, very comforting for me to be able to make touch with him through Louise. And one of the things that I just would comfort me to know was that why I hadn't realized how sick he was and taken him to the hospital earlier. Now he had a disease that was going on for 5 years, so the fact that he was in a death process, which was a lengthy one, was not a surprise. And yet at the timing, something kept me from really getting how sick he was. And so I asked, and I just want to share his reply with you. He said, if you had seen the larger picture, you might have rescued me, as if there was anything to save me from. And then he says, and now the journey begins, mine and yours too. So it has been very comforting to me and encouraging to me to see that yes, things on that dimension of life do exist much as I had understood. And in that way, Louise has been a great gift to me. But just the gift of her life and her friendship and the fun that we've had together has been wonderful over these years. So I'm very happy to be able to share Louise Hauck with you this evening, and I know you'll enjoy it.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. It's fun to return to California. I am a native Californian. I raised my children in Southern California, then moved to the Bay Area after my divorce, and then moved to Boulder, Colorado, where I had spent summers at my grandparents'. And one day, in the middle of a movie, I had a vision that shifted my whole reality within 20 minutes, and I knew I was to move to New York City. Within 3 weeks, I sold everything and arrived in Manhattan. So it's fun when I return now as a New Yorker to California. And the first time after a couple of years in New York, I was at my dentist in Southern California, where I come every 6 months, and the hygienist just kept chatting, and I thought, everyone's so chatty out here. And I thought, New York is really getting into me. I love to observe the difference between Californians and New Yorkers. And the very first time I went to New York, I was sitting in a restaurant, one of those cute ones down from the sidewalk, and there was a group of people who would convene every day after work. And one among them was a friend, a retired policeman, and they'd all been to the shore. The shore. And at the time I was living in the Bay Area, and I said, well, it sounds like all of you go to the beach every chance you get. And he says, yeah. And I said, well, some of us in the Bay Area are kind of concerned about the hole in the ozone layer and staying out of the sun. And he says to me, so you're going to tell me that I worked all my life to get to my retirement, and I'm going to stay home because there's some hole in the sky? And he says, I worked all my life to go to the shore, and I'm going to stay home. And he says, yeah, the earth's going, and someone's got to fix it, but I'm going to the shore. Another basic difference between Californians and New Yorkers. I was in a health food store. To pay for my things, I had to take out my glasses case, my wallet, my hairbrush, and the guy behind the counter picks everything up and is looking at it. So I looked at him and I said, do you like my stuff? A Californian would have said, oh, I'm sorry, and would have handed everything back. He looked at me and he says, yeah, some stuff I don't. So I walked out thinking, he likes my stuff. So they have no explanation. It's quite basic, quite refreshing, actually, the contrast. And I love the diversity of New York. In my work, I'm continually challenged to experience and to convey the necessary exercise wherever we are to find that which connects us all, wherever we are in the world. And I quite glibly used to use the example of when I'm on the subway in New York, and I might momentarily buy into the illusion of separation, that I am separate from another, and look at someone across the subway car and think, how could anyone pierce himself all over like that? And then I have to give equal time to that which connects us. And when I find that frequency, there's almost a zing sound, and the person usually looks right up and smiles. So it's fun to do it in New York City, and then I was challenged in an even deeper way when my adventurous daughter, who never did anything halfway, hopped boxcars to Alaska one summer to work in a fishery, went to New York as an actress at 17, got her real estate license, convinced New York she was 24, was leasing lofts to artists in Soho, decided it was too greedy out there. So she went to the yoga center on 13th Street, became a yoga teacher, went to Yogaville. She'd already explored Buddhism, didn't like how the more devout you become, the more reclusive you become, went on to Jerusalem, converted, was speaking Hebrew within a year, converted to Judaism, and last August married into the strictest Hasidic tribe in Jerusalem. And I've just submitted my story of going to the wedding in Jerusalem to the New Yorker. Some of my very mainstream friends who start to hyperventilate at just the word coincidences suggested that I submit my story to the New Yorker magazine. So if it got there okay, then I guess it might reach other people. But it was so gratifying to find that which connects us in this very devout tribe. So as I travel the world, from lumberjacks in Quilcene, Washington, to countesses in Paris, I find people scratching their heads asking the same questions: what's going on here in this crazy world? So I love being able to offer a perspective that helps understand this crazy world, and that indeed in the bigger picture there is a plan, and it is quite perfect. The group I did, the group of lumberjacks in Quilcene, it was fun at the end of the day telling these big hulking guys to go write a note to their dream fairies and put it under their pillow. The next morning, one of them came down, he had a big furry beard. He said, "I had the best dream I've ever had." And this fellow had had a near-death experience and didn't know it. He'd been to the bar after work with his friends, had too much to drink, picked up a, quote, blonde who didn't matter, ended up submerged in a lake, where he said, "I looked down and I saw myself trying to get out of the car looking like one of those stuffed animals with suction cups." And I said, "Well, how do you think it is that you were looking down at yourself?" He hadn't thought about that, and I proceeded to slowly inform him that we are greater than our physical boundaries. We go beyond our physical boundaries. We're greater than our physical selves, and a part of us is eternal. Then he said he went towards this light, ended up on the beach, doesn't know how he got there, figured he better go after the girl or he might be accused of murder. She ended up on the beach. And I said, "Well, what do you think that light was that you were heading towards?" He said, "I don't know, I guess it was the sunlight." And I said, "But didn't you tell me this took place at night?" So I proceeded to describe near-death experiences. So it's gratifying to see the receptivity, the increased receptivity. I was astonished when Oprah Winfrey had on James Redfield when Celestine Prophecy first came out, and how much just the concept of coincidences is changing people's lives. Well, I'm finding something that recently came to me. Well, of course, the next step beyond coincidences is there are no coincidences. And most of us, many of us, are now getting quite accustomed to viewing synchronicities in our lives, seemingly psychic timing of events, a word coined by Carl Jung. Well, I'm discovering that there's more to observing synchronicities in your life, even beyond that it's just a hoot. As you observe synchronicities, as you identify a synchronicity in the present moment, you're acknowledging that there's a bigger picture, aren't you? Something more is afoot here. Something's going on. I'm discovering as people are awakening and learning to be fully in the present by processing their stuff, coughing up fur balls, as I call it, using repeating patterns as an indicator that something keeps surfacing to be healed, and that everyone out there who pushes your button has just been sent in to trigger those issues in you. That as people are being able to be more fully in the present and hooking up to the source, I changed that. We're always hooked up to the source, but using their connection to the source, that the synchronicities they're viewing seem to be speeding up. Now, what recently came to me is that there's something that's beneficial for our evolution just in the viewing of synchronicities. That initially, as you're acknowledging a synchronicity, yes, there's a bigger picture. Pretty soon, you are experiencing the present moment relative to the bigger picture. Pretty soon, you're experiencing the present moment through the bigger picture. And then as you're opening and awakening intuitively, which is going to happen naturally as you're living fully in the present, bringing through more divine energy, which has intuitive gifts built in for our survival and our spiritual selves, then pretty soon you're going to be experiencing the present moment through the bigger picture and have a sense of where things fit as you go along, as opposed to experiencing an isolated present moment wondering, where does this fit in the bigger picture? So as I say, besides being a real hoot, it's doing something for your growth, for your evolution. So I observe people waking up and starting to know so quickly. And one of the greatest gifts that I can give anyone is to help them trust their own sensings. I was doing a talk in Sandusky, Ohio. There was a woman in the front row who asked a question, and she said, I've been psychic all my life. And she, in a sense, wanted to describe the terrible burden of what a cross to bear being psychic. And I said, yeah, sometimes there's a downside, as there is with everything else, but we don't have time to feel special about this anymore. We need to help others trust their gifts. It's part of our natural state. So I love being able to provide a framework within which people can start to trust their own sensings.